Here's a comparison of my stock turbo versus the 17T turbo. I left both of those on. I disconnected it here. They do come apart, so you can mount one turbo at a time. Alright, so as you can see, the oil pan is on. We are making progress. Remember when you're taking off the oil pan? There are 3 bolts that are kind of inconspicuous. They're here, other side, and then one is on the other side of the transmission, up a little bit next to the transmission lines. But overall, pretty good. Clean up the pan a little bit. I did not take this thing apart and replace the silicone. I didn't see a reason to do that, but it's looking good so far. The kit did come with several extra, I hope they're extra, these bolts. I verified everything, double checked everything. There's no bolts missing here, so they have to be extra for some odd reason. But anyway, I'll show you guys what I'm going to do here next. So to take the power steering pump off to get to the bolts for the oil pan and to push the rack down, the steering rack a little bit, obviously I have to take off the serpentine belt. Also, you're gonna have to undo the steering column, so you can drop the rack down maybe a couple of inches just to clear it with the oil pan. I decided that I'm going to go ahead and replace some of these idler pulleys as well as the belt. So this is what that stuff looks like. I got this guy here. I got this here. So the old ones, the old parts looked okay. However, I don't feel like going back in here. Just in case something does happen, and the car does have over 100,000 miles on it, so might as well do it. I checked the other belt. Doesn't have any real damage on there. The pulleys are nice and tight on here, so you know, when you spin them, move them, maybe this one just tiny bit, but everything else looks good and solid. I'm going to go ahead and change them since I'm in here anyway. That'll help me out tremendously. So keep plugging away. Hopefully we can put everything together down here, route the intake tubes, or the, what do you call it, the intake hoses. There we go, intake hoses, and then start putting everything together. Hopefully the turbos can go on today as well. We'll see. Alright, so making progress slowly but surely. Got the inlets on, got them wedged, flipped up so I can put the turbos on. Got the back one back there. Despite having the engine completely disconnected from the subframe, these things are still a tight fit. They are not, they don't have much give. These are the cheap eBay ones, but I mean they do not have much give. So hopefully once the engine is repositioned, I can take a look around. In particular, the clearance here is somewhat worrisome. Now that that's completed, the very next task is to assemble all the turbos, or remove all the lines and then assemble the lines from the old turbos to the new turbos. This line just so happens to be the coolant feed line on the front turbo. That line I ended up leaving on when I was removing the turbo just because it was easier. I removed it. Just want to give you guys a quick heads up. When you're doing this, you're removing the old O-rings. Despite what they look like, replace them. Doesn't matter. These look like they're in an okay condition. Get yourself a new set of gaskets. It's not worth taking the whole thing apart just to do this. When you put the new O-rings on, you definitely want to put oil on them. As you put them on, you want the thing to slide so they can go in undamaged. Same with down here. It'll help with the installation and prevent any kind of damages. So I'm gonna go ahead and continue this on the other turbos, and then maybe I'll do a side-by-side comparison of the turbos just to see the difference. Alright, so here's a comparison of my stock turbo versus the 17T turbo. And you can tell 17T is quite a bit larger. When you go ahead and measure the inlets, it's roughly 1.8 inches versus 2 inches. It's a little bit less here, but there's a lip here, so try to get over the lip. We'll be right at 2 and some change. Surprisingly, my stock turbos have very, very minimal shaft play. So very minimal side to side, almost none. And then in and out, it's almost non-existent. Maybe half a millimeter. I don't know if these things were replaced under warranty before I got the car or not, but I mean, they are not worn at all. But 17Ts are always better than stock, so we're gonna roll. This is probably a very good time to upgrade your inlets. That way you are taking advantage of the larger inlets, so you're not restricting the turbos. Breathe. I don't think, somebody once mentioned that they basically take these turbo housings and they machine the inside and make them larger, but the OD is actually larger than this guy, so I don't think that's the case here. And then here's what the inside looks. I mean, a little bit of play. I don't expect it to be super tight. I mean, there's some play. You can barely see any play there. But when you look at the new turbo, I mean, if you compare the exhaust wheels, much larger. Now what is strange is this guy here, I guess not. I didn't realize this one was loose too, but this one's pretty loose. No, that's not indicative of whether it works or not. Just seems like that'd be something that you would want that loose. But it is what it is. Just have a little bit of play. Actually, this one, the stock one, has less play than this one. I don't know, maybe it's a mistake. Guess we'll find out. That's strange that you would think you could probably put a shim here. It's like a good millimeter. Anyway, we'll see how it goes. I'm going to go ahead and swap all the lines from here to here. Here's all my O-rings, and we'll continue with the next turbo. And just in case you're wondering, should you get aftermarket gaskets for your twin turbo upgrade for your N54, I want to show you guys a quick comparison to the gaskets that you will get from the eBay package versus something like Euro Tuning or one of these other sites. So on the left side here, as you can see, for your oil drain line, it's just basically a flat piece of, I don't even know what this is, maybe reinforced cardboard. Now this is also, it's not metal, maybe reinforced cardboard, but it's got this raised lip. it's going to ensure seating. So that's the difference with your oil drain line gasket, which is pretty important because if you get a leak there, you got to take the whole thing apart. And then for the gaskets for your exhaust manifold, I don't know if this is going to show up in the video, but the difference in thickness is probably 0.5 millimeter. I don't know if you guys can actually see that or not. This one here is the Euro tuning. This one here is the one that comes with your eBay kit. So for, I don't know, 80 bucks, 100 bucks, it's worth the upgrade. Don't forget that with the eBay turbo kit, you do not get all of the gaskets. So you won't get, for example, like all the O-rings and whatnot, which you need a bunch of these little guys, and then you need a few of these larger guys, and then you also need the water pipe gaskets. But more importantly, you don't get the studs and you don't get the copper nuts that go onto the studs to hold the manifold on. So I think the entire kit you can find online for like 140 bucks, 150 bucks, depending on where you buy it from. I highly recommend that because the last thing you want to do is start digging back into this entire job. So the assembly of the turbos, or putting the turbos back on, assembling the entire thing, should I say, it's going pretty good. I want to point out a few things that you guys may run into an issue with that you definitely want to be careful with. When you're putting this back together, here's the easiest way that I found to do it. The first thing, when you are close to the block, I left this heat shield on. I just then bolted it here and here and kind of bent it upwards. Based on where it's at, it's going to look very tempting to delete it. Do not do that because these lines tuck behind the turbo, or I'm sorry, they tuck, these lines here tuck behind this shield, and if you haven't noticed, your exhaust housing is right here. So the intent of this shield is to make sure that these lines don't get cooked over time. So make sure you don't delete this. Couple other things to remember. I guess maybe this is just a tip, but I left this line on, which I believe is the oil feed. Yeah, so this is the oil feed, oil drain. Left both of those on. Of course, put new O-rings on, put some assembly lube on there. You can use oil, you can use whatever, so they all slide in there very, very nicely. And then I also left the coolant in feed and in feed and whatever this is, the in-feed and the return. That's what it is. The in-feed, return. Left both of those on. I disconnected it here. They do come apart, so you can mount one turbo at a time. And then I'm going to go ahead and put it together. Make sure I go ahead and connect this line up here. Push it in. Push that in. Do not forget your wastegate line. Your nipple is up here. Put that on, and then all that's left to do is, if you staged your intakes, is just push this down, put the intake on. This side is done, and then we will move on to that side. Here are the 17Ts. They are installed in the car. So far so good. One thing that you guys may want to do as you're assembling, obviously remember to put some oil on the O-rings so they're sliding in and not getting damaged, but also you may want to try to do the same thing with some of these lines. So if you do have to move them around a little bit to kind of finagle things into place, they'll slide and not slide a little bit easier and not get completely stuck in one position. And then obviously you can tighten everything together. One other thing that I noticed was, well, first of all, don't forget you have your lines run into the wastegate. So there's one that comes down this side, there's one that comes down the back. The first centimeter or so of that line has been on the other wastegates for a while, so you may want to cut that portion off so when you put it on, it's nice and tight on the wastegate. Not that it'll pop off, but just one more thing not to have to worry about. But overall, everything looks good. Gonna continue assembling. The intakes fit pretty good on here. They're tight. This one is actually touching the radiator and the pulley, so hopefully once I put the subframe back under the car and maybe the engine kind of evens out, hopefully there's some space there. Otherwise, I'm gonna have a difficult time clearing that. Other than that, that is all. I'm gonna continue moving on. I'll keep you guys posted. As you can see here, I got the intake in. I want to show you guys something. When you get this intake, or at least when I got my intake, it comes with these reinforced ribs. There's one here, one here. It's like every 6 inches there's one of these things. But when I first put this thing in here, it was an actual circle, and it was touching the fan and the pulley, and for the life of me I couldn't figure out why it was doing that. Now I couldn't find online, although it was a very, very quick search, on how exactly to route this to not touch, because you can't really change the physical distance between the engine or the pulleys and the fan. So when I got to looking at this intake, I noticed that the rings were right where the pulleys are. So what I did was I removed it and I gently squished these metal rings, and it made just enough clearance. There's like 2 millimeters here, back there, as well as this pulley here of clearance, and then this here is kind of pinned backwards, and then the length of the tube that goes onto the inlet of the turbo pushes it this way, so it keeps this entire pipe going this way. So the only issue that I see here is maybe it rubbing up against the alternator, which I may have to do something about. Maybe somehow pin it backwards this way. But overall, pretty tight fitment. Another issue I ran into, which I'm not sure why this is occurring, but I found it strange. So when you look at, hopefully you can see this, when you look at this pipe here coming down, if you look up at that bend right there, that black tube is the intake going onto the turbo. Well, it's a 90 degree that comes along, and this tube here, this water hose, was actually folded over almost 90 degrees. Now I didn't notice that. What I noticed was when I was trying to line this pin here with the pin on the thermostat, I put it on and it was very difficult to put on. It just wouldn't line up. Once I got it lined up, I clicked it into place, and I just so happened to run my fingers up against the hose just to make sure that everything was fine, because it seemed odd. It was kinked up here. Now, to get around that, thought about a few things. Thought about rerouting the hose. I actually tried going around the inside of the elbow, which it looks like it would work, but it doesn't. This doesn't reach close enough. It's like an inch and a half short. So instead what I did was I took the thermostat housing off and I ground down this pin on the thermostat housing and the one up there. There's 2 of them. So this thing can actually rotate. Now I didn't grind them down all the way. I left a little bit of a lip, so when this thing goes on, it's very difficult to put on. So even when you, even if the locator pin is not there, it still doesn't really move, but it's locked in. Can't really take it off. So if you guys run into that issue, that's one way of getting around it. I'm hoping this guy doesn't have an issue, but it shouldn't, because the hose is coming from from the bottom here. There shouldn't be anything obstructing it. I am keeping my intercooler coupler still disconnected, because I actually don't know where my engine sits. It's been hanging, and I've been hanging it with by the engine mounts, and then using a jack to move it up and down. So right now I actually don't know what the actual height of it is. It might be shorter, might be lower, might be higher, so I'm not going to quite connect this, as it can move around. So thus far, no real issues other than what I just mentioned. I'm going to continue moving on, hopefully get the subframe on. We'll see.